The United Nations has issued a report of companies doing business linked to Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank. It is somewhat of a victory for Palestinians, albeit a victory several years in the making. The UN Human Rights Council was tasked with conducting this report back in 2016. Since then, the agency has identified and changed the number of firms. So, does the measure go far enough? Welcome to Palestine Files. On this episode, we're going to explore a number of issues regarding the report and the companies who are making a sweet little profit at the expense of Palestinian suffering. The UN Human Rights Council has finally published a list of companies with business ties to Israeli settlements. Despite repeatedly delaying its scheduled release for more than 3 years, the UN body has now named and shamed 112 firms that do business in Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank.
This was a state-led initiative. 32 states voted in favor of the Human Rights Council resolution requesting the creation of the database, and 15 states abstained. But it's important to note that not one single state voted against it. As to what happens next, that's also in the hands of states. The report recommends that if states wish to follow up on this, they should consider setting up an independent expert body to take this work forward.
Among those listed are prominent travel agencies who have come under fire for financially benefiting from the Israeli occupation. They include Airbnb, Expedia, and TripAdvisor. In November 2018, Airbnb said it would not take any more reservations in Israeli settlements, only to reverse the decision in April 2019. The move was widely believed to have come following Israeli pressure.
Fact-finding mission highlighted 10 types of business activities it viewed as being of particular concern, given the well-established illegal nature of the settlements in the occupied Palestinian territory, and their impact on the daily lives and the human rights of the Palestinian people, on whose land the settlements have been built and continue to be built.
The release of the report comes amid threats by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to annex Tel Aviv's settlements in the occupied West Bank. Netanyahu has signaled that the move would receive the green light from the United States under President Donald Trump's so-called deal of the century. All Israeli settlements are illegal under international law. This topic was hot on social media. Here is what some of you guys posted, starting with Rana, who says, "That's just a paperwork. No any meaningful actions can be taken against Israel," is the opinion of Rana. Moving on to Rebecca, Rebecca has posted a symbolic picture of a cow draped in an American flag with looks like Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu milking the cow. The cow represents apparently American support for Israel. Moving to Nadir Desiri, who says, "As long as Israel has hold of the American power, they will continue with their arrogance. They are still enjoying American taxpayers' money and subsidies." And Naz Lal Mohammed says, "The occupiers are shaking because more people are aware of the brutal occupation supported by over 100 companies that are exposed now to the world." Let's move to Mike, who says, "I think the world deserves the right to make an informed decision on whether or not to spend their money with companies who profit any activities they don't agree with." And E. McKelland says, "Absolutely, but of course, arrogant apartheid Israel won't agree with anyone else's civil rights." And moving on to our final one here from Michael Scott Gary, who says, "I will never buy Israeli products or vacation in Israel. Stop the Palestinian genocide." Michael there expressing his views. That was social media. But what about the Palestinians themselves? As always, our team has been on the ground in the occupied territories, taking their point of view.
هلا هي خطوة جيدة أكيد من الأمم المتحدة، يعني أي شيء يعني بصب في صالح الحقوق الفلسطينية هو شيء إيجابي يعني. وإحنا بنعرف إنه المجتمع الدولي والأمم المتحدة كلهم تحت الهيمنة الأمريكية والغربية، وبالتالي يعني أي تغير ولو بسيط في موقف الأمم المتحدة هو شيء ممتاز، شيء إيجابي يعني. هلا انه مش ملزم، اكيد هو غير ملزم بطبيعه الحال.
لا يكفي اسرائيل فوق القانون فعليا، والامم المتحده تعرف ذلك. لا احد يستطيع ان يفعل مع اسرائيل اي شيء. يجب على الامم المتحده ان تطالب وتقطع العلاقه الرسميه مع الاحتلال لحين ازاله المستوطنات، وليس مقاطعه شركات تعمل مستوطنات.
المستوطنات بحد ذاتها غير قانونيه، لانها مقامه على اراضي فلسطينيه هي تحت السيادة الفلسطينية الكاملة.
لازم الموضوع يرفع لمجلس الأمن بحيث أنه يكون هذا القرار ملزم لهذه الشركات إنها ما تعمل في الأراضي الفلسطينية. طبعا بعد الهجمة الشرسة يعني تتوالى الأمور، يعني صفقة القرن كان يعني ردة الفعل أقل من المتوقع في الشارع الفلسطيني، وبنطمح إن شاء الله يعني بعد ما تعدي هالغمة هذه بانتشار فيروس كورونا إنه ما تغطي على ردة فعل الشعبية باتجاه الامور والقضايا الوطنيه المهمه.
هي لازم تاخذ قرارات جديه بهذا الموضوع، خاصه انه معترف بدوله فلسطين كعضو مراقب بالامم المتحده، وخاصه في ظل الازمه وظل انه اغلب الدول واقفه مع الشعب الفلسطيني ضد صفقه القرن. فكيف حنكون احنا واقفين مع الشعب الفلسطيني ضد صفقه القرن وبنفس الوقت بنشرع الاستيطان؟ طب ما هو الاستيطان اصلا مجرم من قبل الامم المتحده والمطالب بتوقيفه. طب كيف انا اذا ما وقفت هاي الشركات؟
Let's take a closer look at the numbers here. And, initially the list had 321 companies, and then out of this number, only 206 were considered for further assessment. And finally, the UN Human Rights Council blacklisted 112 firms or business entities. Now, according to Palestinian officials and activists, many multinational firms and Israeli firms have been left off the database. The businesses, which include Israeli and foreign ones, were not sanctioned by the UN. In fact, the United Nations stopped short of sanctioning them, leading many to believe that much more could. Time to welcome our first guest of the show. Dr. Ihlam Muhtasab is a professor of media studies and the director of the Center for Islamic and Middle Eastern Studies at California State University. Her most recent project is her award-winning documentary 1948, Creation and Catastrophe. Dr. Ihlam, welcome to Palestine Files. What do you make of firstly, the reports?
The report took about 4 years, which is too long to be produced. First, because it was contentious, and second, because of the hovering Israeli and U.S. pressures and continuous attacks, actually, on the United Nations Human Rights Council, which is also part of the larger BDS campaign. And I'm sure also the companies themselves that were part of the list put pressure on the council as well. The report actually was issued on the eve of the United Nations Human Rights Council's main annual session opening in Geneva on February 11th. Neither Israel nor the United States are members of the forum, which both accused of bias against Israel. Actually, the U.S. pulled out of the council just in 2018, following Israel's footsteps, basically.
So let me just get this clear, Doctor. First, they said the report would blacklist the companies, and now it appears it hasn't.
Well, a spokesman for Michelle Bachelet, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, who actually released the report last month, said the report was not a blacklist and was not intended to qualify any of the company's businesses or business activities as illegal. And that's probably because of the pressure I just mentioned before. Any further steps, according to them, will be a matter of Human Rights Council member states. They should take it further and act on it. So we still have to wait and see if they would do that. Now, the Security Council is dominated by the US mainly, especially with the veto power, of course, of the United States. So the United States, in effect, backed Israel's right to build settlements on November 18th of last year, 2019, abandoning its long-held position that the settlements or the colonies were against or inconsistent with international law.
Okay, so understandably, the US and Israel have immense lobby power, but shouldn't the United Nations be independent?
In this case, actually, the biggest lobby in this game is the United States government itself. It became the lobby with the help of Israel to put pressure on the United Nations Human Rights Council. So, for example, in March of last year, the UN announced it was delaying the publication of the report because of the immense pressure they were under, which angered, of course, many activists, because it was also postponed in 2008. So that would have been like a postponement several times. Also, this came after the World Jewish Congress said its CEO, Robert Stinger, had met Bachelet last month and urged the cancellation of the database. So that tells you how much pressure, was put on them and how much lobbying. Actually, Bachelet was attacked by the Trump administration after the release of the report last month, especially by Mike Pompeo. They attacked her severely. They called on her resignation. Similar pressures were actually practiced against the former High Commissioner, Zaid Ra'ad al-Hussein, who was in charge of the initial, investigation of those companies. And if you look at the numbers, they started in their initial report from 307 companies that went up to 320 companies. And then, as you can tell now, the number went down to only 112. That shows you the amount of lobbying that took place.
A lot of lobbying indeed. And Dr. Ahlam Muhtasam, Professor of Media Studies, thank you very much for joining us on Palestine Files. Dear viewers, we're going to take a very short break and be right back with the rest of the show. So don't go anywhere. Following the release of the list, reaction has been mounting. Rights groups have welcomed the publication. Amnesty International says the database offers new hope for accountability. Amnesty says these companies are profiting from and contributing to systematic violations against Palestinians. It added that we call on companies to comply with their international responsibilities and stop doing business in the settlements. Human Rights Watch says the publication of the database should put all companies on notice. To do business with illegal settlements is to aid in the commission of war crimes. Meanwhile, the Palestinian foreign minister has hailed the move, saying publishing this list of companies and entities operating in the settlements is a victory for international law and diplomatic efforts. Riyad al-Maliki has urged the UN to issue recommendations and instructions to these companies to end their work immediately with the settlements. The Palestinian Prime Minister went one step further, threatening to take action against the firms, saying, "We will pursue companies listed in the report legally, through international legal institutions and in courts in their countries for taking part in human rights violations in Palestine." Mohammed Shataya has called on the firms to immediately close their headquarters and branches inside illegal Israeli settlements because their presence contradicts international and UN resolutions. He also says Palestinians will demand compensation for the company's use of our occupied land illegally.
وهذا الأمر الذي سعينا من أجل أن يكون هناك جدية فيما يتعلق بالمؤسسات الدولية وخاصة الأمم المتحدة بما في مجلس حقوق الإنسان بنشر أسماء هذه الشركات حتى يتم اتخاذ إجراءات بحقها في حال أمعنت واستمرت بالتعاطي مع هذه المستوطنات غير شرعية وغير قانونية.
The news did not go down well with the Israelis, however, who have accused the United Nations body of bias.
ההחלטה של מועצת זכויות האדם של האו"ם לסמן חברות בישראל היא חסרת ערך. הם מסומנים. מי שיחרים אותנו מוחרם בעצמו. בשנים האחרונות קידמנו בארצות הברית, ויש כבר ברוב המדינות שם, חוקים שמי שמחרים את ישראל נענש בעצמו.
Our second and final guest on this episode of Palestine Files is Charlotte Cates, the international coordinator of Samidun Palestinian Prisoner Solidarity Network. It's an international network of activists that work to support the rights and freedom for Palestinian political prisoners. Ms. Cates, welcome. If we could start with the independence here of the United Nations, which has once again come under the spotlight.
It's long been since time for the UN to be independent of the domination and control of the United States, especially when the United States and its allies, including the Israeli state, are systematically tearing apart the fundamentals of international law and are in fact themselves violating, again, the principles of international law by imposing illegal, unilateral, coercive measures on countries around the world that simply refuse to comply with the United States' regime change objectives from Cuba to Iran to Venezuela. So we need to demand that the United Nations take action on Israeli violations, on United States violations, and also take action to lift the sanctions and lift the unlawful U.S. economic blockades on countries around the world.
So the UN is not so innocent here. If it was any other country, any other entity, they would have been imposed with sanctions, and there have been international outcry. There would have been international outcry with the mainstream media doing so much more than it should to tarnish that entity's image. Why do we not see such action when it comes to Israel?
Well, again, we come back to the power of the United States, which is, the greatest threat to world peace and security, the greatest promulgator of terror and oppression around the world. I mean, the United States hasn't been held accountable for 17 years now of war and occupation in Iraq. The United States hasn't been held accountable for its ongoing attempts to sabotage governments throughout Latin America, including in Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. And the United States is Israel's largest partner, providing $3.8 billion a year in military aid to fund Israel to demolish Palestinian homes, lock up Palestinian children, besiege Gaza, subject Palestinians to extrajudicial executions. I mean, the United States is paying for Israel's war crimes. And the United States is willing to use all of that international power to attempt to, terrorize the world into going along with this agenda. At the same time, this once again speaks to the fact that we simply cannot rely on international institutions controlled by these very imperialist states to defend the rights of the Palestinian people or to defend the rights of people around the world.
Charlotte Cates, the international coordinator of Samidun, I'd like to thank you for joining Palestine Files. Now, this story has made the headlines around the world. Here is what those reports said. So we sat down with Mahmoud Nawaja. He is the general coordinator of the BDS National Committee. The BDS advocates for boycott, divestment and sanctions against Israel until Tel Aviv meets its obligations under international law.
Palestinian market is a captive market for the Israeli one, and these companies, all Israeli companies, are using and profiting from the occupation and the Israeli settler colonialism apartheid regime by using and stealing the Palestinian natural resources and the exploitation of these resources. They are using and building in the infrastructure in the Israeli settlements in the West Bank, and they are also engaged and complicit in violation of international law by being part of these settlements, and also our human rights. They are being part of projects in Jerusalem and all the places in 1967 Palestinian territories. The United Nations and many other countries are already complicit with the Israeli settler colonialism apartheid regime, because these countries, states from Europe, United States, of course, Europe and other countries, and now even there are and Arab countries are opening the door of normalization, with a free normalization with Israel. All of them are complicit with the Israeli regime by maintaining this regime by their free trade agreements, military trades, and all type of trades with this regime. While such regimes should be sanctioned by governments and by the global community, and also by the United Nations, by the European Union and all international entities, they are kept free. This regime is kept free, and this is what we mean by these countries and these entities are complicit in maintaining such regimes. The UN list of these companies is extremely important, because it can mount bigger pressure against this company to stop their violation of international law and stop their complicity in the settler colonialism Israeli apartheid regime, and also it can do a reputational damage to such company, which means that they will be economically harmed also. This can also feed the ongoing BDS campaigns against this company. We already have several campaigns against several companies, but these companies being listed in such an important list can really help the campaigns to be moved forward, and also that can really mount a far away bigger pressure against this company, and it can help in getting this company out of the settlement industry.
What else can you say about these companies doing business in Israeli settlements, apart from, have you no shame? Are you not watching the news? How many Israeli violations of international law, violations of human rights? How much aggression must Tel Aviv commit for you to cease doing business with an occupying apartheid entity? Humanity literally gone out of the window here. As for the UN office that delayed this report by nearly 4 years, shame on you too. You didn't even have the courage to blacklist the firms. But what appears to be certain is that those who advocate for the boycott of Israel will keep all the companies in mind. Thank you for watching Palestine Files, and see you next week.